You've seen the number. You just didn't know you were reading an order. It's inked on the side of a neck in Santa Ana, sprayed on a block wall off a freeway ramp out in the Inland Empire, stitched into the ball cap of a kid in East LA who can't be more than 14. 13. Just the number, over and over. So common across Southern California that your eye slides right past it. Here's what it says. 13 is the 13th letter of the alphabet. The 13th letter is M, and M stands for La M, the Mexican Mafia. Every gang that wears that number is signing a name. It's telling anybody who can read it exactly who they answer to. The Sureños carry it. Even MS-13, the one that lands on the evening news, the one presidents say out loud,
"And we're going to destroy the vile criminal cartel MS-13 and many other gangs." But MS-13 is particularly violent. They don't like shooting people because it's too quick. It's too fast. I was reading one of these animals was caught and explaining they like to knife them and cut them and let them die slowly because that way it's more painful and they enjoy watching that much more. These are animals.
Even they had to bolt that 13 onto their name and fall in line like everyone else. Somebody decided it would mean that. One man, and he didn't decide it from a boardroom or a street corner or the back of a car. He decided it from a cell. By the time a whole generation was wearing his number, he was locked in a concrete box 2,500 miles from the streets he ran. Every call recorded, every letter read, and none of it mattered. The taxes still came in. The orders still went out. Men still lived and died on his word. His name was Peter Ojeda. On the street, they called him Sana, and every cage the government built for him only ever proved the same thing. You can lock up the man. You can't lock up the number. None of that existed yet. Not the number, not the empire, not the name people would come to say like a warning. In the beginning, there was just a kid in Santa Ana, and nothing about him told you what he'd become. He was born there in 1942, in the city sitting at the dead center of Orange County. By his early 20s, his name was already in a file. The first arrest, by the accounts of the record, came around 1965. There would be many more. He fell in with F Troop, the hardest street gang Orange County had at the time, and ran with its Salvador Park clique, the crew that hit harder than the rest and held more ground for it. Somewhere in there, he picked up a name, Sana, short for Santa Ana, the city that made him. Back then, it didn't mean much. He was one more young man in a town that didn't hand men like him a lot of exits. The exit it did hand him was prison. And prison became the through line of his whole life. San Quentin, Folsom, Pelican Bay. He moved through the worst the state had, and inside those walls, the Mexican Mafia already owned the yards, a handful of made men running thousands through the steady, reliable use of violence. Ojeda became one of them. A carnal, a fully initiated brother. He carried a heroin habit the whole way, and he used the same authority he was building to keep his own supply moving, wall or no wall. The two things lived side by side and never once got in each other's way. But all of that power stopped at the gate. Outside, the streets were still chaos, fractured, feuding, answering to no one. Not yet. The day it changed, the cops filmed the whole thing. January 1992, El Salvador Park, Santa Ana. Close to 200 gang members stood out in the grass. Men whose whole lives had been built around killing each other. Men who'd traded fire days earlier, standing quiet, waiting for one person to speak. Law enforcement rolled tape on it and even on the recording, it doesn't look real. Ojeda climbed to the top of a set of metal bleachers. Long-sleeve shirt, black and white checkered. His hair had gone gray, and inside the organization, they'd taken to calling him the Old Man. He had a document in his hand. He gave them 3 orders. The first was a ban. No more drive-bys on other Latino gangs. Not fewer, none. Break it, and you answered to the Mexican Mafia, and for the M that carried the same price as being a rat or a rapist. It meant you died. The second was a tax. Stop bleeding each other over corners, he told them. Find the dealers working those corners and take a cut. The money would move up, off the sidewalk, up the chain to the IME. The third was the pitch that made the first 2 go down easy. He wrapped all of it in La Raza, Latino unity, a wall against the black street gangs pressing in from outside. Defense, brotherhood, that was the language on top. Underneath it was a collection system.
It was Saturday afternoon in January 1992 when Peter Sana Ojeda delivered a message to hundreds of gangsters at El Salvador Park: stop the drive-by shootings. Gang killings were on the rise in Orange County, and bringing rival gangs together seemed nearly impossible. But Ojeda had the respect and the reputation. Ojeda was Orange County's Mexican Mafia leader. For the next several months, Ojeda held a series of peacekeeping meetings to end the violence. Some civic leaders applauded his effort, but law enforcement officials suspected that by ordering drive-by shootings to stop, he was establishing not just control in drug sales, but in gang violence as well. Those who refused to obey Mexican Mafia were assaulted and killed. In 1993, Ojeda was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm. That year, Santa Ana detectives investigated 48 gang killings. Ojeda's grip on Orange County streets continued from inside prison walls. Ojeda was paroled in 2000. 5 years later, he was sent to federal prison after pleading guilty to racketeering and was sentenced to serve 14 years. In July, the 68-year-old Ojeda was again named in a federal indictment, which claims he continued to exercise control of Orange County gangs from federal prison. Reporting for the Orange County Register, I'm Denise Salazar.
By August, he'd done it again. Same park, more than 500 men this time. And it didn't stay in Orange County. The model jumped. Los Angeles, San Diego, San Bernardino, one of the biggest meetings held out at Elysian Park. Years later, a senior MA figure, Rene Boxer Enriquez, said the quiet part out loud. L.A. didn't invent this. L.A. copied Ojeda. And this is where the number got its teeth. The gangs that signed on took a new name for themselves, Sureños, Southerners, and pinned the 13 to it, not as decoration, as a receipt, a stamp of who they paid, who they answered to, who could end them. Even Mara Salvatrucha, the MS-13 the whole country would eventually know, traces that 13, and its rank underneath it, straight back to the machine that started in this park. What Ojeda built on that baseball diamond was not a peace treaty, whatever the papers called it. It was infrastructure. It would outlast the men who signed it, outlast the decade, hold for more than 25 years. The 13 on the wall wasn't a letter anymore. It was a chain of command, running from a street corner all the way back to a prison yard. For the people on the paying end, it never felt like a chain of command. It felt like rent. Every week, the collectors came. In each neighborhood, the local gang leaned on whoever was moving product on its corners and took a percentage off the top. The cut went up the ladder, collector to shot caller to the IME. A quiet weekly tax skimmed off the trade on some of the poorest blocks in the state, and it ran for years because almost nobody outside those blocks was watching. Then the ban Ojeda had ordered did something Ojeda never intended. The reporters who tracked this world, Sam Quinones more than anyone, caught the twist. When the drive-by stopped, the neighborhoods went quiet. Quiet in a way outsiders could see. A street where nobody was shooting was a street somebody could buy into, and they did. Property values in places like Santa Ana started to climb. and homes that had sat cheap for a generation were suddenly going for $200,000-$300,000. New buyers moved in. Filipino nurses were one group researchers flagged by name onto blocks that had never had room for them before. The people who got pushed out were the ones the gangs had always sworn they were protecting. The working Latino families. La Raza, priced out of La Raza's own streets. Ojeda never set out to gentrify anything. He set out to get paid. And the machine paid so well and so quietly for so long that it was only a matter of time before somebody with a badge came asking who built it. The badge showed up in 2005. That year, the government indicted what it called the Ojeda organization, Ojeda at the top, two co-leaders under him, Marco Diaz and Jose Becerra, and the web of gangs feeding the same tax it had been feeding for 13 years. On paper, he was 63, an address in La Habra, a career criminal at the tail end of a long run. By the accounts of the case, his reach ran to something like 3,400 inmates inside the Orange County jail system alone. Late in 2006, he pleaded guilty. 14 years. His first federal sentence. And here the Bureau of Prisons made its move, a smart one, on paper. They didn't just lock him up. They shipped him clear across the country to the federal penitentiary at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, 2,500 miles from Santa Ana. The logic was clean. Take an old man, cut him off from the streets he ran, put a continent between him and his people, and the network starves. The head dies, the body follows. The body didn't follow. He ran it from Lewisburg through a small circle who could reach the outside for him. His girlfriend, Susie Rodriguez, carried his word to the streets, his messenger, his voice, the hand that moved the orders and moved the money. His brother Eddie held things down until Eddie died in 2010. After that, a man named Donald Aguilar, Big Sluggo, became his keyholder on the ground in Orange County. None of it was private. The phones were tapped, the mail was read, and Ojeda knew it. So, the real business traveled in code, orders and dollar figures folded into what read like family news. And it worked. The tax kept coming. The orders kept landing on corners 3 time zones away. The old man had just gotten harder to see. But holding ground you can't see means handing real power to a man who can, and Ojeda was about to hand it to the wrong one. The wrong one was named Armando Moreno. They crossed paths in April 2007 in a San Bernardino lockup, while Ojeda was in transit to Pennsylvania. Moreno went by hard times. He was out of Garden Grove, he had a resume that M respected, and he was close to being made himself. Ojeda saw the answer to the one problem exile couldn't solve. He needed a man with real authority standing on the ground back home. So he handed Moreno the county. Understand how rare that was. Ojeda was the only IME member ever to hold an entire county alone. No other brother sharing the territory, no one splitting the take. It was his. And now a piece of it belonged to a man he'd known for one afternoon. It didn't take long. By 2009, Moreno had stopped taking orders and started giving them, standing up his own mesa, moving to run Orange County as his own. What ended him wasn't a war, it was a tattoo. Somebody dug up Moreno's past and found he'd once run with a black street gang, the Hoodlum Crips out of Garden Grove. The ink gave him away, HC, for Hoodlum Crips, that he'd tried to bury years earlier by adding a single line to make it read HT, Hard Times. There was even a jail form in his own handwriting naming what he'd been. In the IME, that is, disqualifying. It doesn't matter how right you are. A man who ever claimed a black gang is finished. January 2010, the IME's senior figures met and ruled. Orange County belonged to Peter Ojeda. Full stop. From his cell, Ojeda put Moreno's people on the hard candy list, the green light, marked for a beating or worse, no appeal. In October 2012, At the Theo Lacey jail, a man cooperating with police was surrounded and beaten on those orders. The order carried this time by Ramon Alvarez. Ojeda had his county back. He'd also made the kind of noise the government doesn't sleep through. By the time that beating happened, the government had already been inside the walls for years. They called it Operation Black Flag, the FBI, the ATF, the State Prison System, the Orange County Sheriff's Department, one task force built around a single problem. A boss whose every crime ran through someone else's mouth. They opened it in October 2008 and spent nearly 3 years on wiretaps and informants. In the summer of 2011, they answered with force. More than 500 officers hit 42 locations at once. When it was done, 99 people stood charged across 5 federal indictments. 2 were RICO cases, the first naming 28 defendants inside the Orange County Mexican Mafia, with Ojeda at the head. The second naming 17 more tied to a Costa Mesa gang called Forming Chaos, and under them, listed by name, were the street crews that had fed the tax for 20 years. F Troop, Delhi, Highland Street, Orange Barrio Cypress, East Side Santa Ana, Little Hood, Maclay, Townsend. A whole economy, printed and stapled and filed in open court. The case had a spine, and the spine was a man named Oscar Moriel. Moriel was no bystander. He'd shot a rival named Joe Elias in 2005, and by his own account, he'd killed before. But in 2009, he turned, and he gave the FBI the one thing they could never take by force: the codes. The way a folded note became an order. His information opened the wiretaps that built the case. He once caught a kite carrying a death order and handed it to his handlers. Investigators later credited what he gave them with heading off some 30 killings behind bars. And then Moriel's own paperwork did something nobody planned for. His notes, every meeting, every handler, every deal, exposed a program the Orange County Sheriff's Department had been running in the dark. Informants slipped into cells next to defendants who already had lawyers, working them for confessions the Constitution put off limits. Once that surfaced, cases began to collapse. The biggest belonged to Scott Deckrai, the man who walked into a Seal Beach hair salon and committed the deadliest mass shooting in county history. Because the same illegal program had touched his case, the death penalty came off the table. He got life without parole instead. That scandal burned in the next room. Ojeda's own reckoning was still coming, and it would turn on the one thing no one could force him to do: speak. Here is what the government offered him: a package deal, and a generous one. Plead guilty, and Ojeda's own sentence would drop by something like 12 years. Susie Rodriguez, his messenger, his voice, facing real time, would walk with about 6 months of home confinement. But it came with a catch. It was a package. Every co-defendant had to sign their piece for any of it to hold. And Ojeda had to do one thing himself. He had to allocute, stand up in open court and say it out loud, in front of the judge, that he was guilty. Late in September 2015, he stood before United States District Judge James Selna to do exactly that. He refused. Not a negotiation, not a stall. He simply would not say it. And because the deal was a package, his silence broke it for everyone. Rodriguez, who'd been looking at 6 months in her own home, was going to trial now. So was everyone else who'd signed on, believing the old man would say what the court needed to hear. Why he did it isn't written down anywhere. The record is silent. Maybe it was calculation. Maybe it was something older and simpler. The pride of a man who'd spent 50 years refusing to bow to any authority that ever tried to hold him, who ran empires out of cages precisely because no wall could make him kneel, and who wasn't about to start now, over a plea form, in the last courtroom he would ever stand in. So they tried him. Late 2015. Moriel testified for 3 days. And Moreno, the man who'd reached for the county and lost it over a tattoo, took the stand and told a jury exactly how his old patron ran the machine. On January 13th, 2016, they convicted Ojeda and Rodriguez on both counts: the RICO conspiracy and Vicar, violent crimes in aid of racketeering.
Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and more. The verdicts for the head of the Mexican Mafia in Orange County. Welcome back. I'm Michelle Tuzzi.
I'm Mark Brown. Investigators say Peter Ojeda has been running the crime gang from prison. He could have gotten out this year, but today's verdicts will keep him behind bars. Orange County Bureau Chief Eileen Frere has more from the courthouse.
Peter Ojeda showed no reaction as the verdict was read. Guilty of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder, assault, extortion, and drug trafficking. The 73-year-old, nicknamed the Big Homie, the leader of the powerful Orange County Mexican Mafia, seen here in a 1992 video provided by Santa Ana police at a park, appearing to preach to hundreds of rival gang members calling for a truce. Federal prosecutors say Ojeda, already in prison on a 2005 racketeering charge, continued his control from prison, running a ruthless gang that kills, extorts, and protects drug dealers. Authorities say his one-time girlfriend, Susie Rodriguez, also on trial at the same time, helped him carry out his activities while he was incarcerated. The prosecutor said she made a bad decision to get involved. She became a facilitator. But her attorney argued Rodriguez was in love with Ojeda and was not criminally involved. She called the verdict an injustice.
You have somebody who's a law-abiding citizen. She was working 2 jobs. She owned her own home. She's just that type of person that just loves everybody and doesn't know when to say no.
Prosecutors say the verdict sent a strong deterrent message to gangs. Unfortunately, Peter Ojeda just didn't get it. These organizations caused significant harm, and he continued to participate from prison. During the trial, Ojeda's attorney says Ojeda could not have run a criminal enterprise while in custody. After the verdict, he had no comment. Rodriguez was taken into custody. Her attorney plans to file an appeal. Prosecutors say Ojeda would have been eligible for release this year or next, but now both Ojeda and Rodriguez face up to life in prison. Sentencing is scheduled for May 9th. In Santa Ana, Eileen Frere, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
On May 9th, Selna gave him 15 years. Everyone in the room could do the math. He was 74. It was never a sentence. It was an address for the end. The address was Springfield, Missouri, a federal medical center, the place the Bureau of Prisons sends the ones who are running out of time. Peter Ojeda died there on June 7, 2018, on an operating table, his heart giving out while the doctors worked to keep it going. He was 76. He had not spent a single free year on the outside in the last decade of his life. Oscar Moriel didn't outlast him by much. In September 2021, in Huntington Beach, the informant who had handed the government the key to the whole thing took his own life, weeks before he was due back in custody. The man who unlocked the case, gone too. But here is the part that should sit with you. None of it stopped the machine. The tax still gets collected somewhere in Orange County tonight. The hard candy list still exists. The number is still sprayed on the walls, still stitched into the caps. In Santa Ana, in East LA, out in San Bernardino, and every gang that wears it is still sending a cut up the same ladder Ojeda built from a prison yard 30 years ago. He was never a godfather in a tailored suit, handing down verdicts in a paneled room. He was something colder and more durable. He built a system that trained its own replacements, wrote its own rules, and made the cost of stepping out of line steady enough that it enforced itself. The walls the government built for him held him fine, right to the end. It was never the walls that failed. Somewhere tonight, a kid looks at that 13 on someone's sleeve and decides it means something worth belonging to. He doesn't know he's reading a dead man's handwriting. You can lock up the man. You never could lock up the number.